Sewing friends, welcome to my sewing room. Today I'm working on a string quilt, just sewing strips of fabric together. They're all different widths, and then I'm trimming them to 8 inches long, I guess, and I'm making blocks. They're different widths, but they're all the same length, 8 inches. I'll put them together in rows, and this quilt needs one more row, so I thought I'd bring you along. We could do this together. Let's get started. The first thing to do after finding some pretty fabric strips to sew together is to just start laying them out. I usually put about 4 or 5 strips together as long as they come. I do not trim much, and as you can see, I don't even trim the sides. I just make sure that all of the raw edges are inside. And this kind of quilting does not even require that you use a 1/4 inch seam. You'll want to use, the smallest seam you'll want to use is a 1/4 inch, but your seam can get just a little bit bigger because you do want all of the raw edges to be inside. Nobody will be looking at the inside of this quilt, just on the outside. And I will say that all of those seams are not exactly straight, but we are going to fix that in just a minute. So after getting 4 or 5 strips together, they're at least 16 inches long so that I can get 2 blocks out of this, but use what you have. I just use my leftovers. Then I trim the edge and get it straight, and I'll be using my cutting mat to give me the 8 inches. My ruler is 6, and then I add 2 more on my cutting board. And after getting those 2 edges straight, I use the lines on my ruler, put it on that straight edge, and then straighten up the sides. So those 2 sides will be straight, but the inside seams may not be straight because all of our strips were not exactly straight. I just don't like taking the time, and I really kind of like the surprise element in this kind of a quilt. There are seams that are a little cockeyed, and that's just fine. So I've got my 2 edges straight, and now I use my ruler lines and I get the 2 edges on each side straight. So now I have a block that is 8 inches tall, and they're all different widths because the strips are just all different. So I'm going to go through with some more strips, and I'm going to make some more blocks for that last row on the quilt that I'm making. So now that I have my blocks together, I just sew them together in a long row. And I like to mix them up. And I'm not measuring quite yet. I get it to be about the right length, and then I will lay it next to my quilt and see how I'm doing. It will either be a little too short or a little too long. And of course, if it's too short, I just need to add a little bit. Usually it's 1 or 2 strips. And then of course, if it's too long, I can just trim it. So It's a really simple process. It's a very simple quilt to make, and I love using up these scraps. I like the bars, all those strings. And here I am just putting the right sides together, pinning it, and I will see how I did with the length. I'll pin it all the way across, and then I'll make sure it's at least long enough, and usually it's too long, and then I just give it a nice trim, and I'll show you how I do that in just a minute. So I've added the last row, and I'm making sure that I get the edges straight. So it is too long, and I just need to get my long ruler, line it up with the edge of the quilt, and trim off the excess. Then I give it a good press, and I just love all these fabrics. I enjoy admiring all the little pieces that have been from other projects or have been hand-me-downs. This quilt, I focused on green and pink, and then I added some white strips to kind of set it off. And I see a little blue. It was a fun quilt to put together, and I'm excited to get it quilted and to get it on my daughter's bed. Thank you for sewing with me today. It's always fun to share my sewing with you all. I love comments, and I like discussing quilting with all of you. So I will see you next time.